actually got some kids to make this for me just about our unit of work this year, and that survey, if it makes a difference, was actually done before we did our unit of work as well. So we'd done some game making stuff, but not as much as we had done after that. So I just spoke about the difference between last year and this year. So we just started playing with it for the first 2 weeks and set it as part of their homework tasks, and we just used these hints on the side, and they really enjoyed just playing with it. And then we also, showed them skills about how they can go onto YouTube and how to make different sorts of games. So they were making maze games, and they were making things falling, and just different types of games, which helped them then with their planning. So we didn't do Screen It this year. I sort of pushed for game making and how valuable it was. So we linked it with their knowledge, I don't know if you could read it up the top, but about energy, so renewable sources, and we gave them the theme Back to the Future. So their games had to show elements of both of those things, and then they went through the planning and had to get it approved. And then this was our links with literacy. So they had to do character profiles and storyboards and things like that. And they did a couple of drafts with them before doing their good copies, just to really elaborate on how they designed their characters and why they had certain aspects. And all their games had to include a story sort of pre-game, so we understood the context of it. We worked in partners this year instead of in groups of 3, which worked a lot better with engagement, and we were just sort of lucky that we could get that many computers together. But what we got them to do is at the start of each lesson write down what each of them were going to do. So in the top one, Jenny's finishing the storyboard, and Jasara's creating the characters on the computer. So they all had a clear goal of what they were going to achieve that lesson, and then they wrote a reflection about it. The reflections, and we always made time for reflections in our game making sessions, which was a really good time to talk to them about their challenges and how they overcame them, and also how they were helping each other out, because all these experts were popping out all over the place and they could really help each other, which is great. And that's just an example of one of their finished products, Energy Adventures. Most of them were sort of based around how using coal is really bad and how they should be using solar energy, and they'd go through levels and collect different panels to make solar energy or something like that. And it was really funny. A lot of them had Julia Gillard in it. I'm not sure why, but as like the villain. I should have put that character profile in. It was a good one. And then they reflected on their game making experience. So on the teamwork challenges, how they helped others, what they enjoyed. And these were just highlights for me and for the kids. I sort of spoke to them about it while we did it. So the students were leading their own learning, which is what I really love about game making, that you are sort of more the facilitator, that they're teaching each other, the collaboration between them. I found it really interesting as well. We said grade 5s have to work with a grade 6, so they weren't necessarily with their best friend, and they had to really be able to communicate just things that came up. Like I had one kid that was doing all of the work, and I said to him, well, what are you going to do about it? And he sat there with his partner and said, I feel like I'm doing all the work and you need to step up. So it's really good for their interpersonal skills, which I think is fantastic. And just the working through challenges. Challenges would come up every single day and they'd get really frustrated, but it was a great chance to talk about resilience and how you can work through things. And the creativity, it was amazing what they could come up with. And it was a great chance for those kids to shine that we spoke about before, that aren't necessarily really academic, but they really thrived in this. And there's really easy links with our inquiry sort of unit with science and literacy and numeracy. our biggest challenges were computers. We have bring your own device. So most kids this year have iPads, and not many of them rent the school's netbooks. So we're using old netbooks, and they were literally falling apart. So unless the kids were saving them to a USB, which we encouraged them to do, but they weren't always doing, one day their computer could not turn on. We'd send it down to help desk, but it might not come back for another month. So a couple of them had to restart their game a fair few times. I didn't find teacher and parent interest and support that much of a challenge this year, but I know that Tim did, so I just thought it was worth mentioning. I think he had to really push to get something like this happening within the school, and we did an excursion to Acme and did something, they were talking about game making, and I realised still the perception that parents have, because they were talking about how fantastic game making is, and the parents were saying, I just had a fight with my kid on the weekend about how they shouldn't be spending so much time on games. So I think that we do need to educate parents a bit more about how games can be beneficial for their learning, because a lot of them still don't see it like that. And in terms of teachers, it was really easy to get them on board to say, yes, we should all do game making. But I think talking to you guys and seeing the difference in our school is they just wanted me to do everything. They were like, we can do it, but you have to show us what to do. And I don't really know what I'm doing, but I sort of will try and figure it out as I go. So I think that makes it hard. There's not a lot of collaboration, and we just do this game making unit. And what I would like to do in the future is integrate it more in different topics across the year, in history or whatever it is. But I would find that really hard to do by myself, because teachers are still quite scared, or I don't really know much about games, so I don't feel comfortable with planning for it. So I think that's still a challenge. They're willing to give it a go as long as you do it. Yeah, and that's it.
So it's been, I think now, we're in the third year or fourth year, I can't even remember, of our game building unit. And what I'm finding is that every year it's getting better, because we're able to reflect on what has gone wrong or what we can improve on. And this year it was really cool, because I think because we've done it for the last 3 years and I've been in a team with the same teachers, we're now all on the same page about making it happen. So everyone's into it. So this year, one of the teachers brought in an Atari, I brought in a Wii. And it was really cool having the consoles and looking at like old games, and the kids got to look at the graphics, and it was really good for them, because they couldn't believe that Super Mario Brothers, the original version, was the original version, because they were used to playing these 3D versions of Mario. And what was also great was that I brought a lot of my games, and we got to analyse what you actually get when you buy a game. So for the first time ever, we got to analyse like the packaging of games and what comes inside like a game package. And so the kids got to sort of, for the first time ever, as a team, we ordered like 100 DVD cases, and the kids actually got to create their own DVD cases with their own like covers and stuff like that. So we got to actually analyse like what a game cover has on the front, on the back. So they took like screenshots of their games they built, and then they stuck them on the back of the game covers, and it actually looked like a real product you would buy. And then they had to create like little game booklets, like, because when you buy a game, you get a little game booklet, like instruction manual, so I'll pass those along. And these took like, the kids have never made anything like this, so you can have a look at them inside if you want. They're pretty cool actually. So I'll pass a few. And that's got all the like literacy stuff in it. So it's got like the stories, the level designs, and in the end, we photocopied these game booklets. So in the end of the unit, every kid got a DVD case with a CD-ROM in it, with their game in it, and a game booklet. So it looked like they had actually a retail kind of product. And Yeah, that's it. But that's basically it. But the great thing is like that this unit has been able to build towards this. Like, no, it's a bit unfair on the other kids because then the other kids have been coming up and saying, why didn't we ever get to do this? And I'm like, well, because we're getting better as teachers. That's why. I'm sorry I failed you last year. But yeah, so now it's gotten to the point where, like, where do we go on from this if we do it next year? Because this took quite a bit of effort to happen. Like, burning the CDs took quite a while. Having to get the DVDs in from South Australia because they were the cheapest, getting the cases, getting the kids to make these booklets took a lot of effort too, because in the past we just did them on random pieces of paper and they just shoved them into these big game things, but it just wasn't really reflecting like the games that you buy in the shops. And they all knew about this stuff, but what they didn't know was like showing them the game cases that we brought from home, that sort of urged them to produce something of good quality too. And you can see the various quality of work, but they all had to work together to create these. So they were able to, in a team, they were able to say, okay, you're going to do the level designs, you can do the story. And they like also honed in on their skills. So some teams, like that team there, Ice Cream Town Studios, they're real, like, and these are grade 3s too. They had a fabulous writer, so they said to her, you write the story. They had a fabulous illustrator. I'm going to help with illustrations. And it was really like cool seeing kids honing on their skills, because that's what I would do too. If I was in a team, I would be saying, oh yeah, I'm good at this. I'll take this on board. And their games are also pretty amazing too. The quality of the games they produced were really cool and creative, and they all worked really well. And they all looked at structures of games too. So they all had levels, they all had bosses. Yeah, those kind of things. The only thing they didn't have was the only thing I think that next year we could push is that the story doesn't get driven within the game. So the story starts off in the instruction booklet, like there's a little introduction to the story, but then like there's no real story elements within the game saying what's happening in the story. So for instance, like there's no animations like that you would get in a real game. So it's just a game. Like when you play a real retail game, there's sometimes story sequences between characters. Yeah, so they're not up to that stage yet, because that's kind of tricky, implementing those animations within the game, because then Scratch gets very complex. You're broadcasting messages back and forth, and yeah, it can get a bit tricky. But I reckon they could be capable of it.
I did that before the actual game.
Yeah. Yeah, like an introduction screen.
Animation to sort of set the story.
Yeah, and we've had groups do that before too, but then it doesn't happen again in the game. That's it. Because it's easy to do it at the start, and it's very easy to do it at the end, but to do it within the middle of the game, yeah, it's very tricky.
The table of contents.
Yeah, table of contents. Yeah. So, but it's been really good. Like I'm fine. Like I think this has been the best year we've had.
Because you were talking when you came up to Queensland in the middle of the year about how this year the kids had put introductions and conclusions to their games, or they put, is that right? They put title pages. And was that last year?
Yeah. Like when we first did this unit, like there was no introduction screens, there was no credits. But now, like I said, each year as teachers, I think we're expecting more of them too. So we're saying like, we're expecting this, we're expecting that, where in the first year we didn't know what to expect. So they just made something that worked. But now the games are getting more structure, like the output of the work's getting better because we know what to expect. Like next year, I'll show them that and I'll say this is what last year's kids did, and it gives them sort of like an inspiration to get better and produce something of that high quality.
Did the kids mind that time that they could have been spent making games they were writing and things?
Oh no, because a lot of the kids loved making these booklets, like especially this team here, for some reason, and this team loved making this booklet. I don't know, they just the making. I think it was a good balance of technology and using your hands and using like art, and then the two merging together. So I think that's what they also loved, that it wasn't just like some sessions. They didn't even touch a computer for the whole, it was them just working on the booklet. And a lot of them also, some of them had this sense that they had to finish this first before they could get to coding for some reason, and that was their decision, not my decision. You know, because I guess maybe there's also this element of they were building these games for an audience, and they understood that without the game booklet, like how is an audience supposed to know how to play the game? Because the game booklet had to explain how to play the game too, and I think they understood that. You know, they're not going to put the instructions within the game, although many games these days are doing that, but they don't have those kind of coding skills to do that. So yeah, I think they got that too. Yeah, and this one's really funny too. This one because it's got a character in it that because it's a Cube family, and in the profile it says Cube Dad dislikes people trying to go out with his daughter. It's really funny. It's really, I don't know. Funny stuff coming out of them. Yeah. Thanks.
It's really interesting too, like the kids, we interviewed the other week. The first time you did it, I remember interviewing those kids, and they were all talking about how they were beset upon by all these problems with setting up their design teams. And that was really that focus that first year, and kids drifting from group to group.
Oh, yeah. Which didn't happen this year.
Yeah, and this year they're like...
Yeah, and this year's probably been the year where I've had the less technical class. Like, they came in with less ICT skills compared to other kids previous years, but they still produced probably some of the best work.
Yeah.
So that's interesting too. Probably because I'm more confident too with Scratch myself. Yeah.
So we've used a variety of games over the course of the project, and for a wide range of reasons as well. Used Sonic Racing just for a short few weeks of one term for our maths as a way to get kind of authentic data for the students to use. So you'd see they'd check out lap times, and it would vary between people who were successful, people who just couldn't get to grips with the game, and that we'd rank it obviously top to bottom, and then they were playing around with different ways of organising that data, and use that data then to influence how they would play the game the next time around. This was all played on iPod Touches. So then they would work out, okay, so if they had one playing of the game that concentrated on getting as many weapons as possible and firing them off, would that actually improve their performance, or were they better off just concentrating on trying to go as fast as they can and on the driving aspect? Or they might race it one day without using the brakes as opposed to trying to brake as they hit a corner. So kind of using it as a decision-making tool and to see what the best possible outcome would be. And obviously with the best possible outcome being getting around as quickly as possible. Another game we played was Plague, which was similar to a board game Pandemic. They were in control of a virus and trying to spread it around the world as far as they could to kill off the population. So evolve it as they went, trying to get an understanding of actually what diseases do, and ultimately how we prevent the spread of disease. So we kind of then flipped it on its head for the rest of our unit. Once they understood how diseases benefited from poor hygiene or unsanitary conditions, then they could start to think about how in the real world we limit a disease and its spread. Loads of statistical information from it, loads of different ways of graphing the information, really got them thinking about how they display their own facts and figures, what's the best way to do it. And they could understand that through games, everyone understands a little heart icon. You understand that's how much life you've got left. You understand, if something's going from blue to red, that that's a bad thing. You don't need that to be explained to you anymore. So that was all using it for them to produce infographics and understanding, different ways of displaying data and information, lots of data and information in one hit. Something that was really fantastic for. So some kids would try it through different things, through a different kind of graph of showing how it spreads through Australia. And then they took on the challenge that once they spread the disease, they then wanted to try and cure it within the same game. So they would start to devolve it to try and limit its spread. And see, once they'd got over like a 50% infected population, could they claw it back again? So they were really playing with the actual goals of the game itself. They weren't necessarily playing it how it was meant to be played. Again, different ways of graphing it. went from very basic bar charts up to, as you saw, the different kinds of infographics. This year we've returned to the Minecraft unit again that we did 2 years ago, and the premise is pretty much the same as it had been before, but we've made some tweaks to it. We've just worked out how it had really gone well last time, how we can improve that. We've dropped certain aspects of it. We've tried to refine it, narrow the focus. And I think it's allowing us to kind of move more smoothly through it. There are fewer tangents that kids are getting hung up on. Beck was saying to me earlier that it was a shame that we dropped one of the design elements from it. From last time we had a big kind of 2-week project in SketchUp where they had to design their own spaceship. But for so many kids, we found that was just a drain on the amount of time they could actually put into the other research aspects of it. And also, if they didn't have the skills to work in SketchUp already, then it would take a lot of time for them to feel like they could produce something that they were proud of. So we've kind of circumvented that this time. We've really been very careful mapping it out against the Osfell strands. And again, we talked about the 21st century skills that Victoria seems to be really focusing on throughout all of these gaming units. So we're able to really crystallise our focus for it. And as I said, the good thing about this time around, we've learnt from what we did before, and we know that we would have said that last time it was an absolute success, but that didn't stop us from wanting to make it better this time and changing things around. I think this time we've got a much better understanding as teachers of how we're using games and what the goals are. We didn't hear a peep from parents this time. There's not even a voice of dissent about what we're doing, whereas last time we would have parents up in the yard saying, "Oh, I hear you're doing Minecraft in the classroom, we don't really want that." That's all gone, and the interesting thing is that we've actually got the sibling of a child who went through it the first time and their parent did complain. This time around, perfectly fine with it. So
exhausted parent battered child.
It could well be.
Oh, maybe it was so good first time there.
Well, exactly. I think part of it, we have changed some perceptions. Another game we played as a part this time that I would say was a qualified success was the ASX share market game. Doing that as part of our maths unit, which is such a rich experience that's kind of available for them. I don't think we executed it terribly well as a faculty. I think it really needed more time than we gave to it, and it needed to be the star of the show rather than something running alongside the other things that we were doing in maths. But it was such a shame because it really was fantastic in terms of the kind of global citizenship that they can get out of it, the understanding of how markets work, how countries work. We could have gone into national debt, we could have gone into different kind of styles of governance and certainly financial governance, but we didn't give it the time. I think that's to the detriment of that. But I think we'll probably revisit it again at some point. I'd hope to anyway, because I think it's a great resource. It's utterly realistic. It's using the ASX 200 companies. I think it would be a real shame if we didn't do it again. But we've got to do it better.
Well, we've got the support of a principal who lets us try these things in the first place and try again and, get things better.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're very lucky there. Other games we've played, said share market game, Legends of Zork, which we got from one of these sessions. What was fantastic about Legends of Zork, with it being a text-only game, I've got a blind student in my class. She could play it through having the technology where the computer reads it to her. So many other games, because they're so dependent on the visual element, are not accessible to all the students, and I think that's a real problem, and it's something that I think we haven't really discussed as a group looking into this project, is that if we're serious about having digital games as a text taken seriously in schools, then they've got to be accessible to 99% of the population. And I think until they are, or until we can find a way to select the games appropriately, then I think we're really lacking in what we're trying to achieve here. Because it's like even this Minecraft project, there is no way she can access that. So it's discriminatory. And I think until we can overcome that and really select games that aren't discriminatory, I think ultimately it's dead in the water. It doesn't matter how brilliant the research came out, how brilliant the results. If kids are left out from it, we can't do it. Or we shouldn't do it, conscionably.
So, what happened with this girl with the other games that you were playing?
Well, with some games, like with Legends of Zork, you could do it. With the share market game, that was compatible because, again, it's very text heavy. In using the JAWS program, where it will read out line by line what's on the screen, and she can navigate through a menu. She can know what's going on. She was actually one of our most successful students early on in the gameplay, before I guess people were able to really rapidly move through menus and things visually. Then she started to get left behind because it just takes so long to listen to a menu rather than to look at it and look at a screen and you can say go straight to the bottom right corner. She's got to listen to the whole page before she gets to the bottom right corner.
We've had conversations with her doing the Minecraft unit for the RLP because she's in my district. Her integration aide and I have been talking about how to overcome that. And what we thought was she is still doing the research about what she wants to build, but we've actually got her Lego. So she will build in real world what she wants, and then as part of a team, her team will then transpose what they've built in Lego into Minecraft, so she can actually feel and see what she's doing.
So there's a way for her to take part in the unit, but that's still not her taking part in a digital game. So it's not equitable.
Tricky. Yeah.
But leaving that downer to one side, I think it really is important because I think it's something that we can kind of forget about. Go back to game making and stuff, and one thing that I think really ought to be picked up on was one of our students' games. This was the game that he made. I'm not even sure which program he used to make it, but in terms of gameplay, we were saying it really kind of does resemble an early 90s platform where you've got to interact with the characters around you, you've got to make decisions, you've got the text comes up as speech. So he used stock animations from it and everything, but he was the one that put it together, coded it, made all the options possible. And so in terms of making games in grade 6, it just kind of blew us away. And he actually did most of this he actually got me to write a note home to his parents to ask for him to have more time on the computers at home to do it, because he was spending all of his class time helping everyone else in the class. Because he'd been pegged as the expert, people needed him, so he didn't actually get to do any of this at school. He had the permission to actually go on after tea time and spend a couple of hours a night building it. He then actually couldn't even bring it in because he'd made it in such detail that the file sizes were so large he couldn't save it and export it. So he had to then find a way of recording his screen. So he played it at home, made a video of it, and then exported the video, and still had to bring that in on a USB stick because it was too large to email. So just the amount of work he put into it was crazy, far beyond anything I could do.
That's grade 6.
Grade 6, yeah. I'll pause it there. You get the idea. If you want to see more of it, then it's on one of our blogs. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to share. Well, we have played Civ 4 as part of one of our units, looking at how really it was in our government unit, wasn't it? I've got to say, I'm not sure how successful it is at really kind of marrying up with the aims of the rest of the content that we're trying to teach. I think it complements it. It does complement it, but in terms of a driver, I'm not sure. So I think we've had, it's another, we've got the full spectrum of experiences we've had with how successful games have been in the classroom and how well you can use them as an accessible tool or as something just to drive learning. And I think we could probably place every game somewhere on that scale of success and failure. And I think we're getting more success than we are. We certainly get more hits than misses with it. But that's not to say they don't happen. But as I said, even with the Minecraft unit, it was a fantastic success 2 years ago. We've still changed it and tried to do something different with it and tried to refine it. Whether or not we'll do it again in the near future, I don't know. I think that will be up for debate. I think a lot of people feel like once we've taken that as far as we can, try and do something different.
I think the essential key to all this has been that, like you said before, we've been facilitators rather than
Dictators.
teachers. Dictators, teachers, same thing. It's really been very self-directed. The kids have just taken, like you can see James, I'm sure that James had some direction, but overall I'd say most of that would be his own commitment to it and his own.
Well, that's beyond, it was teacher James who was taking the group, and it's way beyond his knowledge as well.
Yeah, he'll fully admit that too. Yeah.
I think something else that Kamal started in grade 5, 6 was Genius Hour, where kids choose a project to work on for 10 weeks and they're in charge of skilling themselves up. So, YouTubing how to do things, looking online how to do things. If they're using Google Sketch, they research that. I think we've really, kids that I've seen over the last 5 years have become really empowered in finding things out for themselves, and they know where to look now and how to sort of deal with a bit of resistance when something's hard and push through that and, ask each other and help each other. And that's something that I've seen really grow in the last 5 years, certainly from, an ICT perspective.
Yeah.
I just wanted to very quickly talk a little bit about sort of what I found after sort of 5 years of working with preps and apps, and I've spoken a lot here about as teachers being really critical of the apps that we're using in the classroom, how to categorise the types of apps that you're using, and really trying to encourage teachers to move away from the skill and drill digital worksheet types apps where 2 + 2 = 4, move on to the next level. It's not actually helping kids build or create knowledge. They do have a role in terms of reinforcing sort of known facts or skills like handwriting, or as an assessment tool if the app has an inbuilt assessment sort of tool in it where you can sort of view their portfolio. But what I really wanted to talk today is about the importance of selecting the right app and then how to integrate that app into your classroom, particularly into a junior classroom. So this is my blog that I've been working on. There's 2 new pages I've been working on lately, the App Supermarket, which has not just good apps but other blogs and sites that of people that I trust, that I found that the apps that they suggest are really fantastic. And the good app checklist, I just wanted to show an example of my prep planner from last year and how I would integrate iPad apps into my literacy program. So here we've got sort of, if you look to Tuesday, Letter of the Week Detectives, a whole class activity, and then I break my kids up into groups. So I've got 5 learning groups here with the groups broken up into reading levels and writing levels. So depending on whether it's a writing activity or a reading and viewing activity, would depend which group the kids are in. But what I wanted to show was that for the first group, which is a low group or a support group, I've specifically listed the app and what they're doing within that app. So, for example, if they're doing read writing, those kids are focusing on phonics and handwriting, looking at the correct identification of lowercase letters. So I've chosen specifically, even within that app, what they're doing, and then moving on to another app where they're doing a book creator activity. Whereas if you look in the next group, they might be doing something different. So they're looking at sorting sounds with the same thing. So it's based on a very, very specific focus area. And then that's reflected in the next week's planner as well. So if you are using apps to assess, that's great. But if you record that information, that can then influence your teaching and the types of apps you use the next week. So that's the sort of thing that I've been trying to sort of get through to teachers that are perhaps unfamiliar with using iPads in their classroom, that they're not just, here's an English folder and there's lots of games with phonics and handwriting and off you go have a play, or here's a maths folder, off you go and play, or a babysitting tool, that these are incredibly powerful devices, and if they're used properly, I've got a teacher-guided group with my guided reading, you're basically giving yourself another teacher-guided group because it's so levelled and so specific and so scaffolded. You can basically utilise it as an extra teacher in your classroom. So I won't go into the other stuff. I just had a few notes just based on the things that were discussed at the Queensland conference and today. I think what I've sort of learnt from
this project is that we're really shifting away from using games purely as an engagement tool. So here's a game, let's play it, and now let's write about it for 3 weeks. I think what we're moving into now is games to support 21st century skills, and games that are really integrated into whole units of learning. So, for example, the Minecraft unit that we're doing this term, where the game's not the focus, the game's the tool. And that's how I'm seeing ICT develop in our school now. And even if we look back 5 years to when I started there, you'd have your 1 hour Mac Lab time, and that's where you did computer skills, and you had your ICT planner that was separate. Now, we don't have an ICT planner because it's such a tool. It's integrated in every planner, our maths planner, our RLP, our English planner. It's what are you doing on the iPads? How are you using computers? Not just using it for the sake of developing computer skills, but because it's a really amazing tool that's supporting what you're doing in classrooms. So I think that shift has been really interesting to see, and it's just a matter of making sure that everyone sort of catches up and is sort of showing really good practice. Just one more thing to add on what Trish was saying before. I think in terms of using games in your classroom and making teachers feel comfortable about doing that, having a collaborative team approach is really handy in terms of really having clear curriculum and assessment guidelines, and being as a team, I think you're less likely to be attacked as a parent body if the whole level's doing it, because you've got 6 people that have made that decision as opposed to one. You've got a little bit more backing. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll leave it there.
Time that I've been involved with this project, I've been doing work in media studies, and because I was away at the beginning of the year, I decided, and I teach drama as well, I decided to implement a unit in drama. So there were no games, physical games, it was just me and the kids in a room. And because we play games in drama, I thought it was interesting for them to see, playing a drama game and then creating a play about games. I'm not sure if they really picked that up, but but the games that we played with the kids were sort of adaptations of games that they might play. So there was a shoot me up game, and with music and different levels, and they were very simple drama games which were adapted for a games type unit. There was a slow motion game, slow motion relay. There are a few things here that I didn't do. The kids did a game survey, and then they played some of their own games on the computer. So very similar sorts of things. So basically the idea was for them to create a type of narrative about a game, and using their skills that they've learnt in drama, role play skills, improvisation skills, and I guess getting them to reflect on how games impact on their own life and whether they can be educational. And that's the great thing about this subject, is that you can take things that kids do in their lives, or that they're thinking about, and by doing a role play, a creative role play, they can learn a lot about what they're doing. And all the kids in this particular class play games, all of them. It was universal. And so they had no problem creating the play. I guess at year 8, the end product, looking at the end product, it was okay, it wasn't brilliant. So I'll just show you what they... it was very... Yeah, it's very... theatrical, I suppose. Look, if I was to do the unit again, I would change it and adapt it. But this was the theme. They could choose one: adults against gaming, teenagers for gaming, the kid who got stuck in a game and couldn't get out. A new game created and developed by a bunch of high school kids. And then there were some parameters around what they had to create. So they had to have one scene where it was completely mime, and they had to use music from a game though there was one group that used a piece of Beethoven music. I don't know why, they just chose that piece. They had to have a frozen tableau somewhere, and the scenes didn't have to be in chronological order. There had to be a freeze. Students could play more than one character, not everyone had to be in the scene. And then over a series of weeks they presented each of their scenes for feedback, and I gave them some feedback. And then at the end they presented their 3 scenes, and then we all peer assessed them using this criteria. And and so generally it was an interesting unit. Again, it was the first time I've done it, so I would probably change it next time. But I think drama, English, if you're looking at games, it doesn't necessarily have to be about, this is what I learned, it doesn't necessarily have to be about making games, analysing games, because kids they're smart and with it, and games are really role plays at the end of the day. You're role playing in a situation, and kids love to get up and act and perform, and so I think drama is the perfect vehicle for doing that. And my big thing is getting kids away from technology, moving away from a screen, and because it's just so ubiquitous at the moment and kids really engage with it. They really love to perform and show what they're doing, and working in groups. So that's what I did.